Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern14.com here to talk SEC basketball player ratings as we go into games of Saturday, February 12th. Blake, let's start at the top with Oscar Tshiebwe of Kentucky. We've had him there for a while. You got some competition for some Auburn guys and maybe even from a teammate, but Oscar Tshiebwe, in my mind, still the best player in this league to date.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think that he's just been something. I mean, we've talked about it. Like, this guy is he's an animal, and you just look at all the, not just the scoring, right, but just the rebounding. It's just there's no one like him really when it comes to rebounding, and he's just been, yeah. I mean, he's he's been in a different stratosphere. I think when you just watch him play and you see all these whatever 18, 15 plus rebound type games, and yes, he's had 20 something rebound games. That one stretch there where he had, was it 28 and 20 in back to back, I think, in December. So he's been incredible. There's no other way to put it. I mean, he's just a phenomenal player and a big driving force for why Kentucky is where they are. And without him, they've still got a lot of good guards, but they don't have a guy like that. And you plug him in on any team in America, and I think he automatically makes them 15 plus points better just because of all the things he can do, even if it's not just scoring. So yeah, I have a hard time disagreeing with your number one spot there with him, because I think we've kind of been on the same page most of the year there. So,
well, to me, the next guy comes from a group of a couple Auburn players. To me, that's Walker Kessler, Jabari Smith. We mentioned a Kentucky guy, that's Washington. JD Notae, I think, has probably edged his way into this conversation. I was a little slower to put him there than some others. Strength of schedule was a big reason there, and maybe shooting efficiency, but watching him play against Auburn, that spoke pretty loudly. Tari Eason at LSU, all the computer models and things have loved him all year. He's been great. Santiago Vescovi at Tennessee's been another guy that I think has been their best player. And Iverson Molinar, a guy that statistically has been really good, but the wins haven't really come for his team. How do you sort it out from there?
Beyond that group?
No. If in other words, of those guys, well, first of all, am I missing anybody? And second of all, who's next? Because to me, Walker Kessler is the next best player in the league. I may be alone in that, but I watch him. I look at the stats. I look at how much impact he has every possession on the floor. And to me, he's the guy that is my number two.
Just say you have Kessler 2 and Smith 3, right?
I do.
Okay, so those are the two, and we've talked about them. I mean, we've grouped those three guys together, I think, most of the season now: Tshiebwe, Kessler, and Smith. And yeah, I mean, it's been interchangeable. I think Tshiebwe's kind of pulled out in front. And again, for anyone that's watched these games this year, I mean, if you've just watched your team's game and you haven't seen Tshiebwe play a lot, then I understand you maybe have a little bit more of a different opinion. But if you've just watched this guy play, I think he stands alone right there right now in that number one spot. But then I think that's where you have Kessler and Smith, who, as we said, there have been times where I think you could, kind of put Walker Kessler somewhere in that same level as Tshiebwe, just based on, to the stats too, but also just the different things we've said when you watch them play and what his ability to affect a game. I mean, it's not the exact same, but it's very similar, I think, for Auburn in terms of the stuff that he brings to the table. So, yeah, I'm with you. You can't go wrong either way, I think, with those two. We've said, Jabari Smith's had a few of those games here recently where, I guess, scoring-wise, I mean, look, this guy's been solid all year long. And what was it? He had a stretch of, I don't even know how many games in a row, double figures. Then he had that 5 points against Missouri, he had 7 against Georgia. But we talked about it. I mean, he bounced back and played pretty well against Arkansas, and that's kind of what we expected. So, yeah, I mean, take your pick on these two. I think it's, the reason why Auburn is where it is, and are these two guys. And then beyond that is where I think it gets interesting, because, like you mentioned, someone like you did. I mean, I'm looking at your list last week, and I know we'll laugh about it, but like JD Notae is like one of those guys where I'm thinking, man, I feel like he's probably a little bit higher up there, but like that's now I think, again, and this is, I think we have to understand this too. And I know this can be a challenge, but I know we're doing individual player rankings, and I know that you put together all this data. And as we said, if we've said this before, for anyone, if you don't think that we put any sort of
You should see
energy
what
and
we're
time.
looking at. We're not going to bore you with it, but if there's a stone that's been left unturned between how much data we've got, how much we've tried to put it in context, how much we've looked at other sources, and how much basketball we watch. I mean, there's nothing that I can think of that we don't evaluate. And Notae has been the sore spot with people. But here's my thing, okay? Being a great basketball player is about helping your team win big games. And I know Arkansas had been hot, and it's not his fault. But when you've got kids at Alabama and Auburn, playing Kentucky and Gonzaga and teams like that, and Notae's beating Texas A&M and guys like that, it's different, right? And my thing is, I want to see him put up what he's doing against a team that matters on a stage where it matters. And that's why he moved way up in my rankings this week, because I was waiting for that to happen. And he did. I mean, I watched the whole Auburn game. I saw what he did. I saw what he means to the team. But I'm just not big on giving credit to guys who do it against lesser competition, because it's not fair to the other guys. And Alabama guys are tough to rate because the numbers don't look as good sometimes. But my goodness, look who they play night in and night out. I mean, of course, they're going to have a harder time against Auburn and Kentucky than they are against Prairie View A&M.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you think we laugh about you are the data and spreadsheet guy. Like if anyone could see this right now, if again we always laugh.
Well,
about our
you would
predictions.
never want to hang out with me, which may be the case anyway. But
I was gonna say,
yeah.
we laugh about our predictions and sort of we just kind of go with the flow on those. And I mean, look, we again, it's from watching games is how we form our opinion on games. But this is you talk about data, like way more goes into these rankings than it does us making previews and picks of games. So yeah, this is where you really can dig into the weeds and get a lot of stuff out of this. But that's what I was saying is, we talk about it being an individual ranking, but the team stuff has to come in there as well, because it is dependent on a lot of different factors. And that's where, like, for Arkansas, as you see, it'd be different right now. We maybe judge JD Notae a little differently if Arkansas is, I don't know, if they're not 8-3, let's say they're 5-6 or something. Like it's a little bit different at that point. And fair, unfair, that's just as we always say, right? Like when the SEC end of season awards, it's very hard for a guy in the bottom four. We've talked about like Scottie Pippen in recent years, right? It's hard for a guy like that to be probably picked as at the top spot or something, just because of team results too and how that matters. But now it's like, this is where I think you're starting to see a guy like this. And that's why I think, if Arkansas continues this kind of run, I think this guy continues to like push up the ladder here. And it's because, yes, right now he is the leading scorer in the league. We talked about, just some of the different things that he's able to do. I need to look up the steal numbers, because I feel like
I think he's leading the league in steals, or second.
No, actually he has the most number of steals. So I think I'm looking up here. He has 55. Kennedy Chandler has 54. Chandler edges him out in terms of average by like whatever, like a 0.6 of a point or something. But so that's what I think we talk about, is just the value that he brings to that team. And as we said too, I mean, think about this. For someone like JD Notae, I mean, he's playing well even when they're struggling. But
right,
he's the one that's been there from the beginning, right? Like he's been that guy that's been there from the start, from the 9-0 start to 10-5 to now 19-5. Like he's been that guy that's sort of been right there. He's been the rock for them. And now as the team continues to have success, it the data and all that kind of rewards it. So I mean, I think he's one that will probably continue to, like I said, you've got him, fifth right now behind Washington?
I've got him behind Washington,
Okay.
and that's the conversation I kind of wanted to have. And Oreo's very fired up about this, as you may hear. Notae's numbers in a lot of ways are better, but it's watching Washington and what he means. And again, that matters, right? It's stuff that you can quantify matters. but so does things that maybe you can't quantify that make a team better, the way he can push the tempo, the athleticism, all the things. I don't know what the right order is there. To me, those guys are the next two. Tari Eason is the guy that the computers just love. I mean, I would say that per minute he's on the floor, he may, according to these things, have more impact than anybody in the league. But I would say to that, I think LSU's losing streak matters. May not be his fault, but to the victors go the spoils, number one. And number two, minutes matter too. And I do weight those heavily. I think minutes are the most underrated stat in basketball because it's a reflection. Well, I mean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's, well, we don't have anybody else, so you got to go out there.
Yeah.
But to me, minutes matter because it speaks to how much does your coach trust you to be out there for everything, not just the scoring and the stats, but how much can you stay on the floor and not get in foul trouble. I think it goes to guarding people. It goes to so many things. And if two guys are equal in terms of what they put up when they're on the floor, I'm always going to give the edge to the guy who plays on the team that's having more success and or is playing more minutes. That's longer than I meant to say it, but anyway.
I mean, Eason's been really good. Yeah, I mean, and we've talked about LSU's kind of streak and such, and but he's still someone that's had to. I mean, without him, they're not even in the same gym as some of these teams probably in recent games. So, yeah, I mean, he's been. We talked about him kind of from the start. I mean, he's someone that just contributes in a lot of different areas, and I think that makes him so valuable as a player. And again, that's a different discussion. But LSU at full strength, his consistency is a little bit different, maybe, and there's not as much pressure versus him having to do everything, and where that can kind of knock some of your efficiency maybe at times. It's kind of not the same, but we had that conversation about Severe Wheeler last year with Georgia and all the different things. We're like, we think this guy's really good, but the numbers just aren't there because, well, he's having to do everything, and so it can be a different dynamic. So that's why we pay you the big bucks for these rankings, because
That's right.
Otherwise, if I had to put these rankings together, my goodness, it would. I don't know how you do it, because this is. I'm just looking up and down. I'm like, oh wait, there's that guy down there, and then that's that guy there. How do I put that guy above that guy? It's a tough task.
I've done these in the past, and they were much easier in past years than they are this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we said that coming in. We said, hey, if you're trying to pick like your all SEC team in the preseason,
good luck.
Good luck, because who knows what you're going to get out of, you could, and we always laugh too, because people talk about how like the SEC does 7 or 8 people, I think, on the first team, and it's like, just pick 5. This is one of the years where you're like, no, take all 8, because if I just have to pick 5, I don't know where that cutoff point is. So, yeah, I mean, it's so I take your pick, I think, on these two in terms of like an Eason there at where he's at, and then I know Vescovi's after that. You talked about him before.
He means so much to them. Yeah. Blake, he does not do anything poorly. He does everything. I mean, the only thing he doesn't do is block shots, if you want to be technical. But guards don't block shots. That's not his role. Everything that he needs to be doing, well, that's true, and which is why he moved. I mean, and that's the thing. Everybody looks at Notae's scoring. He does stuff on the other end too, blocks and steals, and and he's pretty good with the ball too in terms of not turning it over. But Vescovi is
average minutes play too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that matters. But Vescovi is like, he does everything well, if not really well. He's very efficient. 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, basically a 60% true shooting percentage, which is field goals and free throws. That's a metric I really like a lot. I mean, he gets steals, their team defends. He's got a lot to do with it. I mean, Vescovi would be, 5 spots higher on this list than any other year.
Yeah, no, we talked about, he's really come along as a player. I mean, think back to when he first stepped into Tennessee. What was that, a midseason sort of thing, where throwing you to the mix and say, here you go, handle the ball for 30 minutes a game. And I mean, he turned the ball over a lot. And I think that was is he ever going to get there? And I'm like, man, this guy just got thrown into the mix, comes in, and because out of necessity, he had to play. And now that he's got that experience under his belt for a couple seasons, a lot more comfortable. You can just tell he's just very confident. I mean, his game's always been very smooth. I mean, he's just got a smooth game. And yeah, it's nice to I know Tennessee fans are excited, but it's nice to see him kind of make that jump because that's where when those guys like him and Josiah Jordan James and you've got Kennedy Chandler coming in, that gives you a dynamic that has allowed Tennessee to have success. So yeah, he's really come along as a player. So
I've got Iverson Molinar next, and I've had him higher all year. And the thing is, again, winning matters, and it may not be his fault, but State's schedule has been light compared to the other teams, and the big wins have been few and far between. And again, that's why Notae moved up. Had a huge game in the biggest game of the year that his team has had, and it's not fair to blame Iverson Molinar for what hasn't happened with State, but you got to reward the guys who were doing those things and leading their teams to wins, and that's why he fell. I don't know that he's less of a player, but it's more about what the other guys in front of him have done when it really mattered.
I was gonna say we always say this about like power rankings is somebody's got to be 1 through 14, and he just
Yeah,
he just happens to be the guy that's fell to this point. But I mean, if he's the eighth best player, right? It's like, wow,
yeah,
like
goodness.
that's the thing is like if he's your eighth best player in your rankings this week, like that shows you exactly where the league is in terms of talent and skill, and and that's why there's going to be potentially 5, 6 teams that could make it beyond the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. It's just there's so much talent, and he's one. Yeah, I mean we can have our frustrations with Mississippi State, and we all know we have based on them just seemingly not being able to get over the hump, but no pun intended. But it just he's been he's kind of that guy too, where you plug him in, you're going to get 15 points out of him every night pretty much, and you just need more help around him because he is on the floor the entire game most of the time, and he rarely comes out. He has to be that guy, or else Mississippi State's probably not in the spot. So I think it's like I would even consider moving him up still a little bit, but it's like we
But
just
ahead
said,
of
it's like
who?
where do you put him, right? It's like and I think it's just, yeah, I mean, these guys are there's so little I think that separates some of these guys. And again, most of this we're doing is on a sort of statistical basis in some of these things, and it's just, yeah, I mean, it's any given night, one of these guys can go off, and Molinar's done that a lot this season. So yeah,
I've got Wendell Green Jr. just behind him. Green is won more big games. He's also played about 130 minutes less than Molinar. He's not as efficient from the field. Really, the thing with Green is it's shooting efficiency. He's 47% effective field goal, which is not good for a guard. But he gets to the line, hits free throws at a high clip, does everything else pretty well. Big factor on the defensive end, handles the ball a lot. Great assist to turnover ratio. He's over 2. And then behind him, I've got Jaden Shackelford, whose numbers haven't been great, but the shooting efficiency has ticked up. He leads the league in minutes. If you want to go with the guy who scores points when your team really needs it, he's done that a lot. He was our preseason player of the year. Again, I have to wonder, would he be higher if he'd played somebody else's schedule because the stats would be better. But he can't stay out of in my mind, he's a top 10 guy in this league, even if he comes in at 10.
yeah, I mean, he's like you said, he was our preseason pick for player of the year, and I think that was the expectation, was that he was going to be on one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league. And, as we said, it just hasn't worked out for Alabama to that way at this point. And, but he still had a good season. And, there have been probably moments where he'd like to shoot the ball a bit better, but he's still scoring consistently. And, he's just, yeah, he's had a really good year. But I mean, going back to Green, he's someone that this was why I think, and I was, as we've talked about, I was probably a little bit higher on Auburn coming into the season, maybe than others, but I still had my questions about, okay, how does Green come in? How does Katie Johnson come in? What does that chemistry look like between those guys? But like Green is, I mean, he stepped
He's
up
a
and
spark plug,
yeah,
man.
and he is that guy that has been exactly what they've needed him to be in this sort of dynamic and how their roster's built. And I think that, he's just, as I've said, he reminds me of just that prototypical, like Bruce Pearl type guard that just, I mean, he can give you that boost when you need it. And he makes big shots, and I know he has turnovers at times, but I think sometimes it's like you have a guy that tries to make plays, and he's one of those guys. Like, he's a playmaker, and it's crazy to think for me that like he's still a sophomore, and he's got a lot of good basketball ahead of him, and yeah, he's been a big part of their success. So I'm with you. I think that he's been one that we probably never even, of
Mm-mm.
this entire list, he's the one that probably never even crossed our minds going into the season, I think.
Yeah.
And yet here he is. Everyone else, I'm looking at your list here, like everyone else was on our radar and probably somewhere on our list going into the season, perhaps, but he was one of those that was not. And for him to kind of do what he's done, he's been a big part of Auburn's success.
Yeah, there were two guys that weren't really on our radar that we've mentioned so far. Tshiebwe we didn't have on our preseason list, but I know you and I talked about it. I said, look what this guy did when he was
Right.
on the floor at West
Yeah.
Virginia. We didn't know how it translated to more minutes. We know that now. Kessler was another guy, was a total wild card. We mentioned him, but we just didn't know. I don't think Tari Eason ever came up anywhere in discussion, and I don't think Santiago Vescovi, even though we knew who he was, I don't think that was when we were looking at the top 20 kids in the league coming into the year, I don't think his name ever popped up. We knew who he was, but he elevated his game. No, the next guy, everybody else had as their preseason player of the year. We didn't. We just said we didn't think Vandy would win enough games of significance for him to be up there. That's exactly how it has played out. And I watch him a lot. And so I think sometimes that works against him because of the phrase familiarity breeds contempt. I see the things that he sometimes he doesn't do, but sometimes when you watch him a lot, you also realize how danged important that guy is to your team winning. And he's the one guy in the league, as much as anybody, that can, I shouldn't say that, but certainly in his situation, there's been a lot of nights where they needed a 30-point game out of him to win. And recently he's been better with the ball. His shooting efficiency is better. He's had those high-scoring nights. And Scottie Pippen Jr. is not going to be the player of the year in the league. I think that's clear now. But I think he's in that conversation of your top 15 guys.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's another one that I think by necessity, his role is what it is, and he'd still be, you plug him in on any of these teams, and I think he's
Mm-hmm.
still a high
What's he doing at
volume.
Auburn? Now,
Right,
that would have been
exactly.
interesting.
I mean, he's still a top player. It's just, as we always say, it can be deceiving at times if you try to break down certain things or say, well, here's this flaw here, a flaw here. But when you're having to do as much as he has to do, that can add some of that pressure and again can sort of knock some of your efficiency at times and can lead to some frustrating things that you do. But these ones, as we've said, these are players that are trying to make plays, and I think he knows that he has to make plays for Vanderbilt to win. And sometimes that's going to work out great, sometimes it won't, just because of your competition. I mean, the level of competition is as good as it's been in the SEC. So that's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, he's got to be on this list somewhere, just because where you put him, I think that's certainly up for debate, and people have different opinions. But he's one of the best 14 players in the league, and that's what we're ranking here.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he's got to be there somewhere. So.
I went Kellen Grady next. And I know that he's not scoring at the clip that he's scored in the past, but that's a function of his team. He's not needed. When they need him to score, he's very efficient. He's, second in the league in minutes, which, again, I'd put a high premium on that. He doesn't do anything badly. Like, he's a 1.6 assist to turnover guy, but he doesn't get a lot of assists. But he also doesn't cost you possessions with turnovers. I mean, he's not going to get steals. He's not going to block shots. But Kellen Grady, another guy, you put him on most other teams, he's probably averaging 20 a night and shooting it pretty well. So he's hard to know where to put because the points aren't there like we thought. But again, how much value does that kid have too? I was thinking about this morning. Just having him on the floor, Blake, when you got Tshiebwe inside, Kentucky's just so much harder to defend because even if he's not being asked to knock down shots in large volume, everybody knows he can do it. And that's what makes him so valuable, I think. It's not just what's on paper, but it's the qualities he's got as a player that at any given moment you can just tap into.
Yeah, and I think that's like he's a player that's hard because you do have a roster like that to where, like you said, it's hard to quantify like the exact value because of what's around him too. And but yeah, I mean he's as we said, he's kind of been Kentucky. We've talked about it all year, like, and really since they've started playing much better, is they have their roles. Like these guys know, to borrow a phrase from The Rock, like they know their roles, right? Like they know exactly what they have to do. And I think that's where, like, for someone like him, the numbers aren't necessarily flashy, but value and player skill, like he's still up there. And I think that, yeah, that's why I feel like he's someone, probably this entire group. I'm like, where do you put this guy? Because it's just hard to know exactly what spot to put him in. So that's why, again, we pay you the big bucks because I don't know that I know where to put him. But I mean, he's a tough one, I think, in terms of where do you place him versus some of the other guys. But there's no
Well,
doubt. I mean,
yeah.
so
Well, he's the exact opposite of the guy that's in front of him in some ways. Like
true.
Pippen has
Yeah.
to do so much for his team, and that's the other thing is when you have to be that guy, your efficiency is going to get affected. And I think you have to know that. But I've got Darius Days and Keon Ellis next. Days' efficiency numbers haven't been good, but LSU defends so much. He's on the floor so much for them. He's always been a guy who can score. He can do a lot of other stuff. Again, not really bad at anything. Ellis is a guy, in terms of offensive efficiency, probably one of the better 5 players in this league. Oh, by the way, he also rebounds for them. He doesn't turn it over. Just, again, another one of those guys that does a lot of things and doesn't do things that cost you games for the most part.
Yeah, we liked Ellis coming into the season because of that reason. We said he's going to be someone that'll kind of fill up the stat sheet at times, and you don't really know where it's going to come from, but there will be production there somewhere. And I think he's still done that this season. He's just done a little bit of everything, and plays a lot on this team, and he is, I think, one of those kind of. I mean, Alabama fans, I mean, they understand his importance, but I think he's still one of those kind of sleeper players in the league that probably doesn't get enough recognition just for some of the value that he does bring to the table there for them. So yeah, I like him being on there. Days is, I think we have to remember too with Days is his numbers have been pretty up and down, but he has, I think, there was a point where he probably is playing through injury, kind of getting back to 100%. And as we said, for LSU, several of these guys have just had to play a lot out of necessity based on, Pinson being out or some of the other injury situations and such. So I think I mean, we've always said, right? Like going back to last year when LSU wins, like when Darius Days plays well, LSU has a good chance to win. And it's kind of held true in a lot of games this year. I mean, you look at some of the games they've lost, he hasn't played well. But again, is that him or is that also a product of just kind of where the roster was at that time?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so hard, right? Because that's 13 and 14 on your list, correct?
And that's the lowest Days has been all year. And by the way, the guy with the bullet that was left off was Colin Castleton. And all that is he's missed games. And when you're not on the floor, but I mean, in Castleton, even if he just missed a couple fewer games, he did enough in the games he played that he's on there. And I suspect he moves back into the top 14 by the end of the season if he's healthy, which then it becomes brutal to decide who you kick out of this. But
yeah,
and it's not just that; it's the guys that we haven't even mentioned yet. Like if you want to go good players on good teams,
there's one guy further down the list here that I don't know if it's recency bias, but there is one guy further down the list that I'm thinking maybe there should be a spot for him because I look at minutes played, I look at shooting about 50%.
I think I know where you're going.
Great rebounder.
No, I don't.
And again, this is probably based on this team's success.
Yeah,
basically.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
It would be Jalen Williams.
Yeah.
He's because I look at him and I know like there have been certain games maybe where it hasn't been that flashy, but I still look overall and I'm like, he is shooting 50%. I mean, he's played a lot of minutes. I need to look up exactly. I want to say he's still pretty up there in terms of minutes.
721 minutes.
Yeah, so that's a lot. I mean, he's on the floor a lot. Great, defensive rebounding. He's second behind Tshiebwe, who,
Yeah.
is just kind of in another category, I guess. But and that's what we talk about. Like that's where you have to. It's impossible just to put aside the performance of the team because I've said, in recent, I mean, really in the last probably couple videos we've done, I've just said, hey, this is the guy I think that has sort of been the X factor. Yes, Notae has been this great scorer and, certainly deserves all the accolades. I still think that, someone like Jalen Williams, without him on the floor, I think this team is just completely different. And so I think he's one that I would, but, it's just,
but
yeah.
it's the year. Any other year, I think I would have had him on there. And when people yell at us for you don't, what about this guy? What about that guy? It's really usually when you think your guy's getting snubbed, it's not about your guy. It's about everybody else.
Yeah.
And if you want to, because this is where you have to look at everybody close. Arkansas still played the easiest schedule of anybody in the league.
Here's what we need to do. Can we go ahead and just go to Southeastern 16 since Texas and Oklahoma are coming within a 5-year span?
We're going to. We're just waiting for that to happen. We have the domain name. We have all that. Yeah, but
that way we can just go ahead and add a few more in. And then, my hope, of course, is the resident, let's just go pick everyone. Let's go to like Southeastern 32. That way,
yeah.
Let's add another conference to the mix. It's hard, man. Like I said, you could go down the line here. I'm looking at some of these guys, just looking at underneath the 14 here, and like
all right,
you're talking
let's categorize. There's two groups of guys. Okay, there's the guys that are doing things on the halves, which means they've got help, and then there's the guys that are doing things on the have-nots. I mean, that's broad base, but
yeah.
All right, we've got Javon Quinterly for Alabama. You've got Katie Johnson at Auburn. You got Kennedy Chandler at Tennessee. Now, I'll tell you what, the guy that I don't think I gave enough consideration to, and I may regret it, Keon Brooks, junior at Kentucky, who's been really good lately. You got Aldis Toney, who's kind of a player in his own category at Arkansas. You got Tyree Appleby, who's been really good when Florida especially needed it with Castleton out. We talked about Jalen Williams. Xavier Wheeler, flawed player, but has done a lot of good things for Kentucky. I mean, and then you got guys that I don't even have like on that next group of 14. Garrison Brooks, Matt Morrell. But anyway, that's the category of like good players on good teams who didn't make it.
And then you've got the guys like
Stanley Amude. There's another one for you.
And then you've got guys like Kario Quindo, Kobe Brown, who have to be the guy on a team that's not performing as well. And so, like those kind of guys, I think are in an interesting category too, because they are having to do so much at times. I mean, it's just, I don't know how it's hard to sort of compare, right? And so it's, man, this is just, think about this though.
By the way, and then you've got A&M, you've got Quentin Jackson, you've got Henry Coleman III, who really does, the computers really like what he's doing this year. I mean, it's crazy. I've done this a few years. I don't ever remember a list that was A, harder to sort out, and B, just had so many good players. But we kind of said this before the year.
Yeah.
We said you look at where the league is going, you look at the coaches they've hired, you look at what they did in the transfer portal, you look at the recruiting ratings. It's not like we're surprised. It's just now we've got this, okay, now that we have all these great players in this league, how do you sort it out? And it's really hard.
Yeah, I think it's all. This is an experiment for the off season, but it's like, I think it's fun to go back, and if you're comparing, let's say you go back and look at the last 10 all SEC teams or something, and you compare that to the top 15 or the 15 players each year. Like, who are the top 15 players, and how do they sort of compare, and how do you compare this list to that list? And it's such an interesting dynamic, because I think in years past that list would have been dominated by those 5 or 6 Kentucky guys that go on to be, first or second round draft picks. But it's like after that, it's almost like you forget about there's still a lot of good players that were in the SEC elsewhere. But now it's like what I think is the fun part is it's not just those guys, right? It's we're seeing so many other. I mean, look how many Kentucky, Auburn, that's 2, Arkansas 3, LSU 4, Tennessee 5, Mississippi State 6, Alabama 7. Is there anyone else? So is that 7 teams represented in the top 14 on your list? So of your top 14 players, I think there's 7 different teams that are represented.
Yeah.
I think it's 7 or 8, something like that. So, that's the thing, right? It's not just there's your 5 Kentucky
8.
players.
8.
8.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's your 5 Kentucky players. There's your, 3 Florida players, 3 Arkansas players, and let's find a couple spots for the rest of the league, right? Like you can have that debate now to where you could have 8 different programs represented in your top players list, and I think that's why, man, the league has just gotten so strong, and it's so hard to separate some of those guys, and that's a great thing because it just makes things so much more competitive. So,
all right, here's what I want to do on the spur of the moment. Let's come up with the guys who didn't make our top 14, and again, our top 14: Tshiebwe, Kessler, Jabari Smith, Ty Washington, JD Notae, Tari Eason, Vescovi, Molinar, Wendell Green Jr., Shackelford, Pippen, Kellen Grady, Darius Days, Keon Ellis in that order. And again, with Colin Castleton kind of standing outside with the asterisk next to him. So here's what I want to ask you. We do this thing April 1, whenever the last game's been played. Who's going to crash the party? Let's come up with that short list.
All right.
Castleton's got to be on there.
I think Castleton's on there. I think Jalen Williams is on there.
Kennedy Chandler's got to be on there.
Chandler's on there.
Keon Brooks.
Maybe. I think Quinterly has a chance to be on there, but it depends on how Alabama finishes the season. I think those 4. So hold on. Castleton, Chandler 2, Williams 3. And then I think it's maybe Brooks or Quinterly is 4 or 5. I don't like.
I'm telling you, I look at Brooks. Brooks's numbers across the board are really good.
Yeah.
You'd like to see him shoot it a little bit better, and Brooks has also done that big games at big times thing lately that matters.
Yeah.
Henry Coleman III is kind of like A&M's got to win some games.
See, that's a harder prediction for me.
Well, I think that's on the fringe, but again, the point being, look at how many good players there are. Xavier Wheeler, another one. I don't think he gets there, but who knows? I think that Katie Johnson, you mentioned him too.
Yeah, I think Katie Johnson maybe, depending on again how the finish is, and look, when we talk about importance and value, I mean, there's no doubt that Auburn doesn't win some of those games without Katie Johnson. So it's like it's really hard to juggle some of those things. So, but yeah, I think Castleton, Williams, Chandler, Quinterly, and then I think it's like Katie Johnson, Brooks, some of those guys like that. Yeah, that's probably who I'd say have a good chance to maybe knock out. It's going to be hard to knock out like the top. I think the top 11. It's going to be hard to knock any of those guys out. Maybe those bottom 3 can mix and match. But I think unless you just see one of those guys in the top 11 fall off, or I guess as you mentioned, like if you miss games or something that can factor in. But I think that top 11 is like, man, I don't know where you take anyone off from that the rest of the season if things have gone the way that they have, or they continue to go in that direction. So
I don't know, this isn't a point of debate right now, but if you want to know why Auburn and Kentucky are so good, who are the 2 teams that have had more players mentioned than anybody in this? And it's those guys. Right. And then if you want to go beyond that, right, Kentucky has guys like Davion Mintz and Jacob Toppin that really contribute on a lot of nights, if not most nights. You got Auburn's you've seen Dylan Cardwell come off the bench and do big things for them. We haven't even mentioned their starting point guard. We got their backup point guard on their list, but Jasper is takes a lot of minutes. I mean, that's the thing, and that's where teams are made or broken a lot of times. It's not always in these these top 20, 25 players, it's like, do you have guys who can perform competently in those supporting roles where you don't really get talked about? And that's why I just think these two teams are almost so airtight heading into the postseason, because they've got everything.
No, they're really good. As we've said, I mean, they have been something all season long, and that's where you look at some of these other teams that are kind of making that push. Whether it is in Arkansas or a Tennessee or teams like that. I mean, we talked about Alabama. They're just so hard to predict, but yet we're still looking here and saying they may have 3 of the top 15 players in the league. If you say Quinterly's 15 or something, it's like, well, there you go. So yeah, it's hard to. I mean, they're just, man, these teams at the top are just, as we said, there's a reason why we look at teams like this as Final Four contenders, and it's because they're not just built around 1 or 2 guys. They're built around guys who, fit where they need to fit, and they fit into those spots and are exceeding at those roles. So yeah, it's been something to watch, and that's why I think you're again, seeing these teams like Arkansas and Tennessee specifically, these 2 teams that are playing so well right now, you start to see some of those other guys make that push, and that's kind of helping them move up the ladder here. Look at someone like an Audis Tony, right? Like someone like him, or as we said, someone like Chandler, or just guys like this that are still such an important part of these teams' success. And yeah, it's going to be a fun race to the finish, and not just when we talk about our rankings, but just in the SEC as a whole. Just because it's going to be interesting to see how these teams continue to kind of progress and get better the rest of the way.
I think we mentioned a player from every team but South Carolina.
I think you're right. But who is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's their problem. Because every night issue. It's one more category. Best really good player on an awful team. It's either Kario Okendo or Kobe Brown, and I've got my pick. I just want to see what yours is.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, I think it's – I mean, you look at, like, what Oquendo's done, and I think that he's not going to get any recognition because he's on the worst team in the SEC and maybe the worst team by far if you just look at the numbers, right? Like, it's just Georgia sitting there at 1-10. But I did the blue ribbon preview for Missouri coming into the season, and Kobe Brown's a guy like I legitimately thought could be like a first or second team all SEC guy depending on how Missouri played, but he just hasn't been as consistent, and I'd probably take Oquendo right now.
Okay. I would have gone the other way, but Oquendo, the thing about him, man, he's explosive sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, like Kobe Brown, I still think he's a good player, and that's what we said. It's like that debate of what do you say about a guy that has to be on the floor 35 minutes or something a game,
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. Like,
if you had to pick a player that your life depended on it, who could make a play for you between those two, I think it's probably Oquendo. Brown's more consistent, more efficient, some things like that. Oquendo's that explosive guy. Like he will put down a highlight reel dunk or something like that if you just tune in to watch on any given night, probably.
I think he's closer to, like, I'm not saying he's on there, but I think he's closer to the top 14 than Brown is right now. So
okay,
I think
that's fair enough. He's kind of the well, no, that's not a good comparison because they're different players. I was gonna bring Scottie Pippen Jr. back into it, but in the way that he was doing pretty good things for just a dreadful team, which was what Pippen was doing a year ago.
I mean, you're still talking about a sophomore here, so like this guy can get a lot better too. So I like that. Like, I think he's he can get a lot better from here, and I think that's. I mean, whether guys stay, who knows? When you talk about the transfer, we can never predict that on any team, no matter how good a player is. But I think he's at least something Georgia can build on. We don't know what's going to go on there. So
what is his story? Because I don't remember him a year ago.
I mean, he transferred in. Where did he? Hold on. Let me find this. This is great.
Georgia rebuilt its entire roster.
Yes, and they had to, right? It was what we talked
Yeah.
about. Is he had to. Yeah, I think he came from Florida, somewhere. I want to say somewhere in Florida. I don't remember. I'm
He's
sure
Florida
people are
man.
thinking this right now, but yeah, I think he came from somewhere in
Come on, that
Florida,
doesn't even get
and
a laugh.
I know. I'm sorry. It's I just like I'm thinking. Okay, Florida Southwestern. That's where it was. So
Which is not even D1. Or no, is that JUCO?
yeah, Florida
Okay.
Southwestern. That's So yeah, that's where he came from, and I mean, I don't know what the expectations were, for him this season coming in. I can't remember back to sort of that was another one I did. I did the Georgia preview for Blue Ribbon, and you can imagine how that went, right?
Oh.
I'm thinking, what do I say? Like, I don't know what to say about a team that has a completely new roster. So I don't even remember what I put about him. I'm gonna look that up for the next time we do a video. I'm gonna see what I said about him going into the season because I don't remember. But yeah, maybe there was something that I put a hidden gem in there and said, hey, we're gonna be talking about this guy on the 14 come February and our top 15 players in the league. So
That's the they got a bunch of guys and here are their names approach.
that's a tough one. I mean, look, I'm sure there are people that watch this video that read Blue Ribbon, and as you and I know, who have worked on this for years now, with Chris Dortch, it's like some of those you go into the season and you're just thinking, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I think over the years, I've written previews for all sorts of mid-major conferences. This was the first year that I legitimately had no idea what, like, Georgia. I think is the toughest one I've had to write because I did not know what to say about them because I just didn't. I had no idea what to expect. I think I probably had to talk more about who left than I did about who was there because you just had more. And that's why Georgia is where Georgia is right now, like it or not. I mean, it's just when you don't have that
Yeah.
consistency and that cohesiveness, and you're not, let's say you're not an Eric Musselman who, as we've always said, that has just mastered the transfer portal even to when he was back at Nevada. If you just have not been able to have those hits after hit after hit, you're playing a guessing game in terms of the guys that come in, and I think that's where, like, Georgia, you had to hope that everything was going to come together with this roster, and it just hasn't. So
You saw the movie Major League, right?
yeah, yeah.
You know the scene I'm thinking about?
I don't think so.
Oh, come on. Come on, Blake.
I had a lot of good scenes.
When
I don't.
there's tons of good scenes. That may be the most soundbiteable sports movie ever. But
That and Happy Gilmore, I think, is
yeah,
is up there too.
I haven't seen that. Can you believe
Oh,
that?
oh my goodness! All right, listen, you guys. I know there are a lot of you. We like to have fun here. You give me
I've
crap,
seen bits and pieces, but
but
I've never seen the whole movie.
of all the people who, we have some fun about my predictions, and I get a lot wrong, and I'm sure, we laugh about our rankings and stuff too. But if there's anything you should be mad about, it's that right there. What just came out of Chris's mouth? That should anger you more than any prediction, anything else. The fact that he has not seen Happy Gilmore. Comment section, we're gonna let you do your thing now because finally, like, I'm gonna adjust some of that stuff to
If
you now.
anybody's listening at this point, but
Well, that's another good point. They're probably tuned out by now, but if they haven't, then
if you have it, let us know in the comments.
magic word is happy. So there you go.
How do we make this happen? Because is it on
Shooter.
If it's on Netflix, I can get it. But
I cannot believe you've never seen Happy Gilmore.
I mean, it's not like I'm ignorant of it, but I've never seen.
That blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind more than anything. I you could have put the last player on the bench at any school as your number one player in the player rankings for this week, and I would have taken that over the fact that you haven't seen Happy Gilmore. So
I deserve this, don't I?
wow, we're gonna. I just yeah. Everyone, how about this? If you're still
Get me a way to watch Happy Gilmore. If it's not on Netflix, I need to know. I mean, I guess I could order a DVD or
the VHS. I have the VHS. You want the VHS? Get the VCR plugged in. I've still got the VHS in here, so you can have that. But here's what we're gonna do. If you're still watching, the three of you that are still entertained by this, in the comment section, I want your favorite Happy Gilmore quote. That's what I'd like. And then as Chris watches this movie, he's gonna refer to the comment section just to see all these great quotes as he goes along. So give me your best Happy Gilmore quotes in the comment section. So this will tell us who our true hardcore fans are. This is a great way to build our fan base. So yes.
Well, before you hijacked this and brought my cultural illiteracy into the show, the scene in Major League I was thinking about.
I
you don't even remember why I was referring to this. This was about Georgia's roster. Okay. This is when like everybody in town is reading the paper and they've released the roster. And they're like they don't know who any of the guys are, and
you've got like the subtitles, and it's having the caption.
Yeah, we can't repeat, none of which we can repeat here, but that's still one of my favorite sports movie scenes of all time.
Well,
that movie was so funny.
I can't even process what you're saying right now because of the Happy Gilmore thing. So anyone, it's just, I don't even know what to say. So we better finish this video because people are just probably thinking, they're already angry at you and I don't blame them for some of these. Come on. But no, we're having fun here, but that is one, like I said, you should get angry at Chris about that one. We're going to let that one fly. So
we need to right the wrong.
I am leading the way on that one. So,
where do they send hate mail?
In the comments section.
Not that anyone would do that.
Just leave it in the comments. That way we sustain. Everything's contained to one area. That way we don't have to. Chris doesn't have to check multiple things. So just send all of it to him in the comment section.
Because my energy and time needs to go to finding Happy Gilmore. Obviously,
listen, we're doing baseball,
which is why you need to take the complaints because I'll be watching movies.
I take plenty of complaints. So, but no, I know most of it is out of good fun. So I appreciate all you guys out there. I really do. And we do as well. Like we said, we're having fun with this. And the baseball stuff started. I mean, we got our first baseball video up. So
hey, William Drummond, by the way, killed it.
Yeah, no, he's knowledge, man. I mean, you talk about he knows it. And so it's great. So yeah, we got all that stuff up. So check out everything we got up on the channel. It's great. So
see you Monday.
Yep.